I'm Alana Gallant, the founder and CEO of the Food Allergy Fund. I want to thank each of you for being here today for what I believe is truly a historic moment. As both a parent and patient who developed adult onset food allergies, I know firsthand what's at stake and how important today is. I created the Food Allergy Fund 5 years ago for my daughter, who went into anaphylaxis at 13 months, and the millions of people living with life-threatening food allergies around the world. FAF is determined to change the course of the disease that affects 1 in 13 children, an average of 2 kids per classroom, and 1 in 10 adults in the United States alone, and more than 350 million people globally. For the first time, government leaders, research scientists, and public health officials recognize that food allergies are not just a patient community concern, rather a national public health crisis that demands urgent and coordinated action. The fact that you are all here in this room shows something profound. We are addressing this health epidemic with the leadership and focus it deserves. But here's what keeps me up at night and what should command all of our attention. Food allergies may be the canary in the coal mine for chronic disease in America. When I started FAF just 5 years ago, I often met families whose children had only a few anaphylactic food allergies. But as time went on over the last few years, and as I met families with younger children, the list of allergens got longer, not shorter, as some would believe. The number of allergic diseases, comorbid diseases, and related gut immune diseases also got longer. Food allergies are reaching epidemic levels while receiving only the attention and investment of a rare disease. The Food Allergy Fund wants to close this gap by asking hard questions about why we're getting sicker and less tolerant, and to look at root causes rather than managing symptoms. We need to deploy innovation, technology, and scientific rigor to solve problems at scale. Here's the problem looking at Food Allergy Fund as a microcosm. Within the FAF board of directors and team of 14 people combined, we represent more than 30 types of anaphylactic food allergies, 6 comorbidities, and 3 autoimmune diseases. And the list goes on. Food allergies are not happening in isolation. They are a visible manifestation of something much deeper. Widespread microbiome dysregulation, thus fueling epidemic levels of chronic immune and autoimmune disease across our population. The same biological drivers of food allergies share pathways with autoimmune conditions, inflammatory diseases, and metabolic disorders affecting millions of Americans. We believe that progress happens when ideas and capital meet urgency and commitment. We fund diverse approaches from our drug repurposing program that can cut years off of the development timeline to connecting early-stage companies transforming the food allergy landscape with breakthrough technology. Today, in an unprecedented high-level commitment of federal attention, you will hear from HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., NIH Director Dr. J. Bhattacharya, and NIAID Acting Director Dr. Jeffrey Taubenberger, ARPA-H Director Dr. Alicia Jackson, and FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Markary, underscoring alignment across federal health agencies on food allergies, one of the most overlooked public health crises of this generation. Today, we are also announcing the launch of FAF's Microbiome Collective, a first-of-its-kind multi-million-dollar collaboration uniting leading research institutions to uncover the root causes of food allergies and related immune-driven diseases. You will hear shortly from leading microbiome experts advancing prevention and treatment not only for food allergy, but for conditions with lifelong gut health implications. We are grateful to the David Koch Jr. Foundation for its major gift to fuel the collective, as well as multiple strategic pillars of research at the Food Allergy Fund. Because of FAF's cutting-edge research funding, unparalleled network of researchers and entrepreneurs, and commitment to solutions, we're able to bring this impactful program to you today and throughout our work. Which brings me back to why today matters so much. This FAF Leadership Forum signals that food allergies need to be treated as a national public health priority. This milestone convening of government officials, research scientists, CEOs, and public health leaders represents a shared commitment to deploy vision, innovation, and technology to help millions by solving disease through thought leadership and scientific research. Thank you for your participation, for your commitment, and for recognizing that when we solve food allergies, we unlock insights that will help address the broader chronic disease epidemic facing our nation. I'd like to thank our board of directors, team, and donor community. 100% of donations to the Food Allergy Fund go directly to research. That is a unique model in the world of nonprofits, and that is our commitment to patients and families. I would now like to introduce our gut microbiome panel moderated by Liz S. Lee White of the Wall Street Journal. We are proud to count Dr. Rashid and Dr. Rhonda, along with Dr. Keim's co-founder, Dr. Sue Lynch, among our founding members of the FAF Microbiome Research Collective. Let's get to work. Let's solve this problem. Thank you.
Good morning. Well, we're honored to be joined by these leading microbiome researchers. And I will kick things off because we want to get right to it. But Dr. Rhonda, you're the principal investigator at the Innovative Genomics Institute at UC Berkeley. You'll get our first question, which is, for those of us who are new to this, what is the microbiome and what role does it play in human health?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here. This is a wonderful place to discuss about this. So the microbiome, it's actually not just along for the ride with us. It's co-author of our biology. We co-evolve with these bacteria. And then I just want to put in perspective. So we think about like human genes make, like our genetic makes up who we are. So if you think about bacterial genes in our body, in the gut, on the skin, because we have bacteria everywhere, we have 100 more bacterial genes than human genes. So technically, genetically speaking, we're more bacterial than humans. If you think about it. So just for perspective, imagine the amount of molecules that they are produced, the chemicals that they're producing every single moment in our body. So they are actually really the ones that are driving a lot of our metabolism. And so if you think about it, they're involved in pretty much everything. Training our immune system, helping us to develop like our mood, our brain, everything. It's involved in everything, and so the microbiome plays a crucial role in our health and the onset of disease and obviously food allergies. So it's something that we need to really pay attention because it's really like defining who we are in terms of like health-wise.
That's great. And Dr. Rashid, how does the microbiome show us? How do food allergies show us when the microbiome and the immune system aren't in sync and are not together?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I'd like to thank Ilana and her team for organizing this very important event because it's really phenomenal that this is happening. So the food allergy are actually an excellent illustration of how the microbiome affects the immune system and how disruption of the microbiome or of the immune system can affect disease. For example, initially, when we were looking at differences between the gut microbiota between healthy babies and babies with food allergies, we were looking only at analyzing their stools. And us and many other centers found differences in the gut microbiota. But then we moved into functional studies. We looked into the mice. And what we found was that if you take specific bacteria that were derived from healthy people, and we put them into a highly allergic mouse model that can develop severe allergic reaction. It's called anaphylaxis. There is actually complete protection from anaphylaxis. It was both if you want to prevent food allergy or if you want to treat food allergy. But at the time, these bacteria are still not available to use clinically. So what was available was fecal transplantation. So we just took the stools from healthy babies and we put them into a highly allergic mouse model and it prevented anaphylaxis. When we put the stools from food allergic babies, there was no protection from anaphylaxis. So then we were like, so what's happening? What is happening there? And then we looked into the immune system. And what we found is that these bacteria upregulate cells called regulatory T cells and specific subtypes of regulatory T cells called ROR gamma T positive regulatory T cells. Regulatory T cells, I'm sure you heard about them because the Nobel Prize this year was given to investigators who evaluated the regulatory T cells. And one of the investigators was actually mentions the work of this person, Talal Shatila, was mentioned in the Nobel Prize summary. He's spent his life working on regulatory T cells. So in his lab, we actually found that these cells are critical for food allergy. We did not stop at that. Now we actually published a paper in Nature, and we discovered a novel mechanism in food allergy. Goblet cells, which are epithelial cells, they produce a protein called RELM beta. And when RELM beta gets high in food allergic patients, what happens is that the microbiome gets affected. And as you mentioned, the microbiome creates the metabolites that are important for health. And these metabolites decrease. Their indole metabolites go down. If we actually abrogate RELM beta in the highly allergic mouse model, there is no anaphylaxis. So we actually have moved a lot between 2013, when we were interested in the microbiome, and now we're doing fecal transplantation studies in humans. We started this in 2015, and now we are at the third trial. We started the phase 1 trial. We found a signal. 40% of patients had an increase in their dose of reactivity to peanut, from traces to 2 to 3 peanuts. And now we are doing a phase 2 trials in teens using a highly concentrated fecal transplant material. It contains less than 1% fecal material. It's important for patients to know. So this is where we are. And I think this is a great illustration because you can apply it also to other diseases.
Yeah.
I should have said, Dr. Rashid, you are the director of the Food Allergy Program at Boston Children's, so thank you for being here. Dr. Kimes, I'd like to start with you for this next question. You're the founder and CEO of Shielta Therapeutics, and then maybe everybody can chime in. But how can we train our microbiome through diet, and why isn't diet enough to prevent food allergies or to treat them?
I love this question. So think about something you like a lot. Most of us like coffee, right? Have you ever actually eaten a coffee bean? It's not so great. But when you go through specific processes, you can turn it into something that is very enjoyable. Our microbiome is the processing center for the raw food or raw material, which is the food that we are consuming. And like most good things, you need both good raw materials and good processing to have positive outcomes that you're looking for. If there is a mismatch there, it is dysregulation and has consequences that are negative. So on the food side of the equation, you can have instances where you are consuming a single food, but we have different processing centers, and it is going to be processed in a different way. We use linoleic acid as a really good example that we've been able to show in studies in infants that is dysregulated between those that develop allergic diseases and those that do not. Linoleic acid is something that's in a lot of formulas. It's in most people's diets, including infants and children. And depending on the microbes in your gut, it can be processed either into a polyunsaturated fatty acid, which is typically an anti-inflammatory molecule, or it can be oxidized into an oxalipid, and that is an inflammatory molecule. So you need both the right input and the right microbial system that's going to metabolize those foods into the proper materials for stimulating the immune system, hopefully in that first year of life towards immune tolerance and away from an inflammatory response. So really it's about matching the two, and you always want to start with the best raw materials you can. So, natural whole foods is where we should all be aiming to go. But then you do need the right processing center, and sometimes that is disrupted for many different reasons, from environmental factors to the drugs that we consume to transference from our family members, all different ways in which we really impact our own microbiomes that will influence how that works.
I would add that, for example, plant-based food, as you mentioned, it will and the high fibers, they will increase short chain fatty acids, and they are important, very important for the epithelial barrier. Breastfeeding also can have an effect in early life. Lack of antibiotics, obviously, you don't want to take antibiotics if it's not necessary. If it's necessary, absolutely, but it could be disruptive if you take antibiotics when it's not needed. Sometimes taking fermented food like kefir, kimchi, yogurt, all of this can add to the microbial diversity and help. For the environment, exposure to soil, exposure to outdoor environment, exposure to pets can affect the microbial diversity positively. Living in a farm or living in rural areas was shown to correlate with less asthma, less allergic diseases. So all of these factors, and mode of delivery, C-section versus vaginal, can also affect the microbial diversity. So all of these factors are important. But I think the question was also why diet is not enough, because it's too complex. Yeah. So the microbiome is too complex. Would you like to?
Yeah, exactly. It's too complex, and sometimes also our genetics. Our genetics doesn't allow certain bacteria to thrive. So we need to help. There are some functions that are not naturally present in the microbiome. And so what if we can reintroduce them? What if we can retrain our microbiome, introduce those functions that they're missing, either introducing those bacteria, because now we know the mechanisms, and then we can reintroduce those functions, and then retrain the immune system. So sometimes you can eat amazing food. You can be exposed to the best environment, but still your body, or maybe because you wasn't passed along through your family, then you don't get those bacteria, and so we need to find a way to be able to reintroduce those functions, and those kind of I would say almost I would consider it almost like a gene therapy, where you put it in genetic material that it's like repairing something that is missing in one of your organs. Microbiome, even though there are bacteria, it's an organ for us. And so you have to consider that as an organ that works as your heart, your brain, but it's made by other cells, but they need us to survive, and it's kind of a crosstalk. And so when they're missing something, we can go and try to repair it, basically.
It's a gene therapy or a transplant therapy.
Exactly, transplant. Exactly.
I'm already hearing so many wonderful things that we've discovered about the microbiome in the last few years. And Ilana told us that the Food Allergy Fund is launching a microbiome research collective to bring together labs. How will this kind of collaboration help further this field? Do you want to start, Dr. Kimes?
Sure. I mean, we're living in a modern day of everybody talking about AI. And what that helps me talk about here is specifically complex data. You heard the reference to how complex the microbiome. That is the opportunity and the beauty of what we're all trying to understand and apply, is it will allow us to address more complex multifactorial chronic diseases. And the tough part about doing that is getting enough data so that you can really, truly, deeply understand the mechanisms that are happening. And it's hard to do as individual companies or researchers to really get that amount of data. The flourishment of AI from large language models is because they had the internet, right? And they had all of this access to data around language. We need that kind of big data to be able to really fundamentally understand and get to a position where we are doing targeted precision medicine through the microbiome. So it helps support a movement towards that direction from my perspective.
And I think if I can add also, the beautiful component of it is the ability to bridge different expertise. And so this is something that it's lacking very much in research sometimes, because people are silos, they work in their own specific area, and they don't bridge. And the breakthrough science comes through connections. science. When you look at things from different angles, you get experts from different part of the problem, and you look at the problem as like a 360 angle, and so you get a stronger science. Like it's better, it's easier to understand their mechanisms. Because, for example, if you have a lot of data, but you don't have the right people looking at those data, and really there is kind of a conversation, scientific dialectic, where people talk and then trying to figure out the mechanisms to then develop therapies. I think it's even with data we are not able to achieve to find therapies or to achieve to understand this complex system. And I think it's the combinations of the ability to bringing together hospital, patients, data from patients, and research center with different expertise that they can come together to create something novel and more innovative. And I think that's something that Ilana and the Food Allergy Fund has been able to achieve, that I think it's outstanding.
Yeah, I agree. I would add also that, particularly it will bring together immunologists, microbiologists, genomic people, and clinical trial experts. So that's very important because, as you mentioned, in the lab, usually we focus on one particular domain. So it is important to bridge all of the technical expertise together in transcriptomics, in genomics, in metabolomics. It's extremely important. And also, I think it is important to be sure that we have some reproducibility, because something at the population level, because what could work in a center might not work in another. So we have to standardize the protocol. We have to sit together and agree on what is relevant, what is not. Mm-hmm. And finally, I think it will open up the door for large clinical trials, hopefully, because ultimately that's the aim, clinical trials in humans. So I think it's an excellent initiative. It will accelerate discoveries.
Yeah.
Ilana also mentioned an idea that I think is really interesting, which is that food allergies could be the canary in the coal mine for other chronic diseases. Do you think, are we able to say scientifically that the microbiome is a shared denominator between food allergies and diseases like asthma and eczema and inflammatory bowel disease? Dr. Rhonda, do you want to start?
Yeah, actually, yes, that's true. That's true because it's what allow us, when we look at food allergy, allow us to look into how the microbiome can train the immune system. And the immune system is involved pretty much in everything. And so being able to use food allergies as starting point to understand these mechanisms, that we can then expand it into other disorders or diseases, it's really important. And so it really becomes a model system to study, would say microbiome immunomodulations, and how the microbiome train our immune system, and how we communicate, what signals are involved, the window of time that we need to, we need to look into if we wanted to intervene for being able to, rewire the immune system. And this is something that I think has far long implications in many other disease, autoimmune disease as well, any type of autoimmune disease as well. It's just pretty much the immune system regulates so many aspects of our life, even during developmental aspect. The immune system can affect the way our brain develops as well. So there are so many implications that along the line that this can really open new area of where we can apply the knowledge that we get from studying food allergy into other other disease or disorders, which is very, very exciting.
I agree.
Yeah. I would highlight, I'm somewhat biased because we at Shelter Therapeutics really focused initially on what is often referenced as the atopic march, but it's really the comorbidity of type 1 hypersensitivity diseases. So think atopic dermatitis, food allergy, allergic asthma, allergic rhinitis, all of these have the same underlying immunological cascade that is occurring. So the beauty of the opportunity here is that if we're actually getting at the underlying cause, we should be able to actually prevent that entire cascade from happening. And that's something we've been very focused on over the last decade, is trying to prove that point.
I agree. And I also would like to point out that food allergy is very common. It's extremely common, and it's bizarre, right? Because we don't expect people to react to food. And I have to tell you, I mean, I got my MD from the American University of Beirut. I saw only one patient with food allergy. I came to Boston Children's to do immunology. I was shocked to see the number of food allergic patients. I was shocked. So what is interesting about food allergy is that it is so common that we can study it at a much bigger scale. And with this, we can understand other diseases. Because in all of these diseases you mentioned, there was dysbiosis, which was a disruption in the microbiome. There was also this disruption in the metabolites. So, and this will lead to the change in the immune system and the immune tolerance. Regulatory T cells will be affected, and depending on which organ is affected, we might either have an increase in the atopic pathway, the allergic pathway, or the Th2 cells, or we might have an increase in the Th17 pathway, like we see in inflammatory bowel disease. I also would like to say that the epidemics of food allergy came kind of like similar to the epidemics of autism. So autism also is implicated in food allergies, and there are fecal transplant trials that have actually shown very promising signals. So in autism. So I think when we write these trials, believe me, we go back to the literature and we look what happened in ulcerative colitis, what happened in autism, and we write our food allergy trials accordingly, and vice versa, because we are all learning from each other in this particular domain, and this is the fascinating part. The food allergy one brings something very interesting, which is, 10% of adults are affected, 8% of children. It's a huge opportunity to understand the microbiome, and it manifests early in life. Huge opportunity.
Yeah.
You've all been at the cutting edge of this microbiome research, but we still have this situation where, as you said, food allergies are very common. So what gives you hope right now as you look to the state of the science? Dr. Rashid, do you want to start us off?
What gives me hope?
Yeah.
Okay, it was in around 2013 that we got interested in the microbiome, or maybe a little bit before. And at the time, we were just collecting poops from babies and driving to get their poop every 4 months, making sure that we get them and we evaluate them. But then after we found that there is a mechanism, and it was published in Nature Medicine, Aza Abdelgadir from Tala Shatira's lab. The mechanism, we found the ROgamma T positive Treg cells, and now we found that the goblet cells are producing REN beta, which actually can be targeted and could prevent or treat food allergy. And we are doing fecal transplantation trials. So when we started designing the trials in 2015 and 2016, believe me, many of my esteemed colleagues looked at us as if we had two heads and a unicorn or something. If you look now on clinicaltrials.gov, you will find hundreds of studies in many diseases evaluating fecal transplant. So these are cutting-edge trials. I really have to applaud the Food Allergy Fund as well as other food allergy organizations that supported us, because all the studies we're doing are not federally funded yet when it comes to trials per se. And what gives me hope is that we already found a signal in adults. They are very difficult to treat. Adults are very difficult to treat. So we already found a signal. We already found that there is a chance of increasing their threshold dose of reactivity by giving them a single dose of fecal transplant. What gives me hope is that we are now collaborating with the University of Minnesota. We are using a highly concentrated form of fecal transplant, and there are capsules now that open up both in the upper and in the lower intestine, so we can actually evaluate the whole microbiome and the effect of these capsules, because we're using capsules that are odorless and tasteless. The patient they take them home now. They take them home, put them in the fridge. So we are we are milestone away from how we started in 2013. And what gives me hope is that there is a lot of open-mindedness now about the microbiome and the importance of doing clinical trials in diseases and in food allergy.
And Dr. Kimes, I think you have some news that gives you hope this morning, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I am a scientist at heart, and data is what gives me hope. And we've spent the last 10 years, as I mentioned, really trying to get to the place where we could have clinical data showing that a microbiome-based targeted treatment provided over the first year of life could actually prevent allergic diseases. And we have Just had our last patient complete their last visit last month in our ADORED trial, which is a phase 2 proof of concept study in which we use a defined consortia of bacteria based on all the observational studies that we have talked about previously. And we have seen in the participants that completed the full year of treatment per protocol that we actually see a 64% reduction in risk of physician-diagnosed atopic dermatitis and a 77% reduction in risk of physician-diagnosed food allergy at 1 year of age. We will continue to follow these children. Well, we had continued to follow the children, but we'll have the data from year 2, which is an observational year. There's no more treatment, but we will be following them to learn more about the durability of this approach. But the data makes me think we're on the right track and that we may be able to actually prevent these diseases in the future as we move forward.
That's great. And
Yeah, I'm echoing this wonderful news, which like it's very exciting. That gives me hope. And also, what gives me hope a lot is also the visionary, the visions or the foresight that actually Food Allergy has started with this microbiome collective that has put together scientists from different areas where now we can look it into the molecular mechanisms. So we have talked a lot about fecal transplant, which it works, it does work, but it's less reliable because you can control it. You're just taking these fecal matter and hoping that it's going to work. We're working now with consortia that is more rationalized, so we actually pick the right bacteria that we know they are producing a certain metabolites, and that will actually end up having the effect. And so we're kind of working more towards a more rationalized approach. And so the idea, and so like for example, at the Innovative Genomic Institute, in our case, we go even further than just putting together a consortia of bacteria. We look at the genes that they are responsible, the metabolic pathways that are responsible of the phenotype, or they're responsible of the improvement into let's say food allergy, and then we introduce them we sow them into the microbiome. So we introduce them into the native microbiome that you have, kind of like a personalized therapy. And so working together with immunologists and other experts in the field, we are understanding together the mechanisms, and then we sewing back the functions that we are missing in the microbiome. And so it's kind of like the next generations of therapeutics, where now we go as a gene therapy directly. That's the gene they're missing. We're gonna put it into your microbiome, and that's something that it's just like you're not introducing new bacteria. You're not going into the understanding these consortia that sometimes they're difficult to maintain for life because they're not adapted to your own microbiome. We are reintroducing the functions that you're missing, kind of like a gene therapy style. And so working together with the expert in the fields here in understanding the mechanisms and then re-put them back into people's microbiome, it's kind of the next generations of therapeutics. And so this gives me hopes because the ability to collaborate with wonderful colleagues in understanding these mechanisms together and then create personalized and precise, safe therapies, it's something that just it makes me extremely excited and gives me really hope in the future for therapies in this area and more.
well, we've heard a lot about 3 different approaches and some amazing science, and why don't you join me in thanking these researchers?
Thank you for all your insights and expertise. I am very hopeful about the transformative potential of gut microbiome research for food allergies and related diseases. Next, we're honored to have with us FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary. Dr. Markary is the 27th Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. Before leading the FDA, he was a surgical oncologist and professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins University. He is the author of more than 800 scientific peer-reviewed papers and 3 best-selling books on healthcare and public health. Commissioner Makary, thank you.
Alana, it's great to be here, and it's great to be with like-minded people who are interested in the microbiome and other things that have not gotten the attention they deserve. So thank you for your important work. I'm a huge believer in this as a frontier of medicine. We've got to explain what's going on. There's something happening in our lifetime. There's been a mass explosion of food allergies, and we didn't see that 2 generations ago. You didn't see it in other countries until they adopted some of the US recommendations for avoidance of certain foods and new Western exposures. So something is happening that we have yet to really unlock. But we do have some very interesting clues. If you go out here 30 minutes west to Fairfax County School, you'll see that in that very large school district that there is a very high rate of food allergies, including peanut allergies, to the point where some kids have to have complete abstinence of peanuts anywhere around them. And people mock that, but that is a real thing. Somebody just opening a product with peanuts in their proximity can put them into anaphylactic shock. And so they live a very different life, and it's cruel for a child to have to insist with somebody at an ice cream store that they have to use a fresh scooper because any cross-contamination from another ice cream flavor could actually put them in anaphylaxis, and the young person who's serving it thinks that they're being petty. It's a very, very difficult life. You didn't see this 2 generations ago, and if you go to Fairfax County School District, you'll notice that the incidence of peanut and food allergies is extremely high, but not among the international students, not among the students from families that recently immigrated to the United States. This is a very internationally diverse region of the country, and there are many kids where English is a second language or they don't speak English in Fairfax County schools. And you'll notice that in that population, the incidence of peanut allergies, in the words of the school health officials, is essentially 0. So what's going on here? Well, in the 1990s, we observed that there was a slight increase in peanut allergies. But of course, when there's a slight increase in something, but the media puts a lot of attention on it, people perceive that it's a higher increased rate of growth of that condition than may represent reality. And it's not just peanut allergies, it's shark attacks. You know, there's been basically no change in shark attack rates, but every year it seems like they're on the rise. And that's because if you see somebody or hear to the testimony, then it's scary. And so it creates a perception. Well, there was both a real increase in peanut and food allergies in the 1990s, but there was also a massive increase in the perception of it. And some of that was good. There needed to be awareness. But the American Academy of Pediatrics at the time felt that they needed to respond to the public question, what can we do to prevent our child from getting a peanut allergy? And they responded with a document that was put out by their nutrition committee that basically said peanut product avoidance in the first couple years of life. And I went back and had asked people, why did you say that? What science was it based on? In transplant surgery, we've known for a long time that there's a principle called oral tolerance or immune tolerance. That is, when you're exposed to an allergen early in life, that you're less likely to reject that allergen as your immune system is forming. Well, they hadn't talked to anybody in that field. They did not know that literature, and in sort of the ignorance of groupthink, issued this decree, which could make sense to somebody who doesn't understand oral immune tolerance, and that ignited a modern-day peanut allergy epidemic. It started right around the time of the year 2000, when that recommendation was put out. And of course, it became a perpetual vicious cycle, because if the more kids got an allergy, then you avoided peanut butter or peanuts in that family or that classroom or that school district, and then less peanut allergen exposure would further increase the peanut allergy rates. So it became this vicious cycle, and it wasn't really until a doctor named Gideon Lack had done a famous study called the LEAP study, and it was hard for him to get funding to do that study. Well, we know this is true. Why would you want to study it? And probably the same logic behind a lot of the groupthink mistakes of modern medicine. Well, we know this is true. Why would you do this? This could sow doubt in the field. What if you get a result that goes against what we already know to be true? You know, and we see these arguments in many areas of medicine. We saw it with the opioids are non-addictive dogma that we got wrong as a medical field for 15 years. People were saying, waving the flag in the air, hey, the science is not consistent with this. Well, I would attribute some of that. So finally, Gideon Lack got that study done in 2013 to 2015. You saw a massive realization that the moniker that was put out in pediatrics residency programs that was designed to be an easy-to-remember chant that would be recited by every pediatrician and family medicine doctor counseling a parent who has an infant. Remember, 1, 2, 3. Don't start milk products until they're 1 year of age. Don't start eggs until they're 2, and don't start any peanut butter or peanut products till they're 3. And that became the dogma. So it really was not until 2015 that they realized they had gotten this tragically wrong. So we're still reeling in from that mistake. Now, there's another piece to this besides early antigen exposure that we don't talk about that we need to talk about. And it's not just with food allergies. It is with so many areas of medicine, because we're learning gut health is central to overall health. And it is the microbiome, this garden of over 1 billion different bacteria, not cumulative total, but different types of bacteria that are central to health. And if you have inflammation of your gut, that's going to cause some minimal dilatation. And if you have a clinical background, one thing you may know is that the most painful things in the human body is pain from something stretching. So when a ureter or a kidney stone blocks the ureter, people think it's the sharp edges that cause the pain. No, it's the dilatation from the obstruction. When you have a gallbladder attack, it's the dilatation of the gallbladder. When you have a bowel obstruction, it's the dilatation of the bowel. And talk to anyone who's experienced any of those. Those are the worst forms of pain in the entire human body. Well, what's happening when our microbiome is altered? It's increasing inflammation, and that's causing some dilatation. Now, it's not an acute inflammation. It's a very low-grade dilatation, and it's constant. It's always there. And there's a lot of factors driving this, but when you're a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old, it manifests as just being sad. That's the clinical manifestation of that phenomena. And so what you have is people where their gut health is not optimized, and then it leads to a whole host of other medical problems. We also know that the microbiome is producing things central to health. It makes vitamins, it makes clotting factors, it makes serotonin, which is involved in mood. You've heard of serotonin. 90% of your body's serotonin is made in the microbiome. What's happening when we alter the microbiome in the modern world? Antibiotics can carpet bomb parts of the microbiome, resulting in overgrowth of one type of bacteria. And a study out of the Mayo Clinic that was recently published showed that kids who took antibiotics in the first 2 years of life had a higher rate of chronic diseases, from allergic rhinitis to obesity compared to kids who did not have exposure in the first 2 years. Why is that? Well, it may be because their microbiome has been altered. Now, the average 2-year-old has already received over 2 courses of antibiotics in their brief 2 years, sometimes in the first day of life, just as a precaution. And we're now trying to have better antibiotic stewardship. But we're not treating the microbiome with respect, and it may be because we don't really understand the microbiome. There's no research in the microbiome, very little research. I talked to the microbiome unit at the NIH. It was like a couple people. This is like the frontier in health. And so it may very well be that there's an intersection between microbiome and peanut and food allergies. And that's what a group of researchers at Harvard Medical School believe. When I spent some time listening to them, and it's amazing how much you learn when you listen to folks, that they believe that there are some microbes that are deficient in people with food allergies. And they're trying to get more granular to find out which types of microbiomes are missing in people with certain types of food allergies. I think that's some of the most exciting work that's being done. And your group is funding it. And so for that, I want to say thank you. This is very important work. We need to focus on the important central issues to health that we have not been talking about that we need to talk about. And so this administration's committed to looking at these issues. We talk about these things with NIH funding priorities. We talk about them at the FDA, where we have an intersection with some of these open biome type groups out there that are doing work in the microbiome, and they have products before the FDA. FDA sometimes hasn't known what to do with these products. What do you do with a pill that has 1 million microbes in it? Are we going to regulate each microbe separately? Are we going to regulate it for one condition, or recognize that if people feel better, maybe that's an outcome that we can recognize? Are we going to require randomized controlled trials for every microbe that could be? We don't do that with probiotics. So what's the line between what we regulate and don't regulate? These are the active discussions that we're having. But I do believe very firmly that gut health is central to overall health, and we have missed the mark when it comes to recognizing the principle of oral immune tolerance. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Alana. I don't know if you have any other points you want to make. I know we're going to hear from some others in our administration, our head of the ARPA-H program. But anything else you'd like to add? Okay, great. All right, thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Markary. Next, I'd like to introduce ARPA-H Director, Dr. Alicia Jackson. Dr. Jackson became the Director of ARPA-H last month. At our annual summit in April, we welcomed ARPA-H leadership and are proud that the Food Allergy Fund is an ARPA-H Investor Catalyst Hub member. We're excited about the next phase of ARPA-H's involvement in food allergies by bringing its unique high-risk, high-reward model. Dr. Jackson joins ARPA-H from Evernow, a company she founded and led as CEO focused on transforming women's health and longevity during menopause. Previously, she served as a program manager and subsequently deputy director of DARPA's Biological Technologies Office, guiding an investment portfolio across biodefense, novel medicine development, and biomanufacturing to protect the nation while advancing groundbreaking scientific capabilities. She has served as a Senate policy advisor as well as co-founder, board member, and advisor of several biotech and health startups. Dr. Jackson holds a PhD in material science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Dr. Jackson.
Good morning. Very happy to be here. I want to give a big thanks to Alana and the Food Allergy Fund for bringing everyone together here around a topic, as Dr. Markary said, is really growing into a crisis. And we don't seem to really understand at a root cause level what is driving it. We have a lot of hypotheses. But there does seem to be what I would call a valley of death between the very basic research that's going on and the commercial technologies available today. And that's really where ARPA-H plays. For those of you who aren't familiar with the ARPA model, I want to give a little bit of a background here so you can really understand where we fit in the ecosystem of innovation, not just within the federal government, but really in the private sector as well. So who here is familiar with even DARPA? Okay, quite a few people. I did have the privilege of serving there for 5 years, both as a program manager and then launching and becoming deputy director of the Biological Technologies Office. And it really is what I would say the crown jewel of the US research and innovation enterprise. It's unparalleled across the world. One of the really unique things about it is that it can take on risk and fund very large problems in a way that neither the federal government traditionally nor the private sector can take on. And I know that even more deeply, having been in both now the federal government and the private sector, especially in a place where food allergy sits right now. There's a lot of hypotheses that are very risky to go after and to put big dollars after. We tend to fund a lot of point solutions or a lot of basic research, but clearly there is something underlying all of this that we're seeing in immunology overall. And at an ARPA, whether it's a DARPA or an ARPA-H, you can start to ask the big questions, which is, what if? What if we could literally tomorrow flip a switch and reset everyone's immune system so that they don't have a food allergy, they don't have an immunology issue? Those are the really big questions that we want to go after here. ARPAs work in a very different way, and part of the reason I'm saying this to all of you is because I need your help. We need your help at ARPA. Unlike a lot of different research agencies, it's very much not top-down. I'm here, I set the direction. We want to create breakthroughs in human health that actually change the course of human health. We set big directions, defeating disease, ensuring that our children live a decade longer than their parents, and ensuring that this nation is protected against whether natural or engineered biothreats. But really, the program ideas come from our program managers. These are exceptional individuals. They can be from academia, industry, startups, even government labs where they might have worked before. The only requirements is that they are deeply technical. They have an incredible passion that they will break through a brick wall to achieve. Things that everyone else might say, oh, this is going to take too long. There's no way we're going to be able to do it. They're the people with the vision who say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring every single resource to the table. I'm going to be able to work with startups, academia, large companies, nonprofits, and make sure that we come together and put enough funding behind this in a very strong technical direction that not only can we make what seems impossible probable, but we can create an entire field, an entire community that can continue beyond us. The other unique thing about the program managers is that they're on a timeline when they come and work for us. Everyone gets about 3 years. So the day that somebody shows up, the clock starts ticking. What that means is that every day counts when you're an ARPA program manager. And it's that kind of drive when you wake up every morning and you think, what happened today? What progress did we make? Are we actually moving forward? That creates this incredible sense of urgency and enables us to truly be a time machine. We take something that we hope will happen in the next 20 or 30 years, and we ensure that it can happen within possibly the next 5 or less than 10. That's why I'm very excited to be here, because I think food allergy falls right into this category. And in order for us to go fund that, we need phenomenal program managers. If you have people in your networks, academics, who are willing to come and spend a few years here, or people from industry, or a startup founder who wants to come and literally make the biggest impact of their entire lives, not just for, a startup scale or a paper, but really to drive forward an entire field, this is the place to come. Now, you have to be kind of fearless, a little bit crazy. My own experience was that when I showed up at DARPA, I started talking about this crazy thing called engineering biology, now known as synthetic biology, and everybody thought I was nuts when I showed up, and that was 15 years ago. But now when we hear it, we don't think about it as some new crazy thing off in left field. It's actually a field of science. And that's what we can do here, which is we can take these bold ideas, things that maybe don't follow medical dogma, things that seem just beyond our reach or require close collaboration between the microbiome community, between immunologists, between potentially other fields that we haven't even been thinking about, and bring them all together. Once we have that program manager, they're off to the races. They bring together the best people across the world to work on this problem, whether that be here in the US or some of the countries that we have deep collaborations with. They can choose anyone. We have incredible contracting flexibilities, unlike those in any other place in the government. It's known as other transactions. But it basically enables us to not just give money and say goodbye and hope it went to a great place, but actually to give very focused, significantly sized dollars, 10, 20, 30, 40, up to 100 or $200 million towards an area, and it allows us to manage it incredibly responsibly. We can turn that money off, we can turn it up, we can switch directions, whatever we need to do, whatever that program manager needs to do to help that community go towards a goal. One of the things I know we've been working with the Food Allergy Fund on is being able, and the Food Allergy Forum, is to be able to understand what are those key things that we need to move forward on. We're in the early days of those. We've identified broad areas. But what we need at this point is some incredible people to come into ARPA-H, to sign up and say, I want to make a huge difference here. I want to move this field forward. I want to make the future happen sooner, especially for every child today that may only be 2 or 3 and starting to suffer from these, so that by the time they're 10 or 12, this no longer has to be an issue for them and their families and wherever they go in life. I just want to close with, I'm very grateful to be leading this agency. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to go tackle giant problems like this one and work together with the community and the best researchers in the world on it. I want to work with all of you. Please come to ARPA-H. Please come talk to us, talk about the ideas, and go out into the community and also tell people about this incredible agency that if we get the right people in the door, we can make very big things happen. I've had the opportunity of working at DARPA, where I myself have been able to see really things that were impossible, not only become probable, but actually go into the field, out into the world, and make a very large difference. That is what we're offering here. I'm very grateful to everyone here. Thank you, and I'd love to talk to you further.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. We'll now take a coffee break in the Lincoln Foyer, and the program will resume promptly at 10:15. Thank you.
I could cough.
Oh, you're gonna.
Three, four, five.
Welcome back. Thank you for rejoining us. At the Food Allergy Fund, we pride ourselves on fostering innovation by highlighting unique progress at early-stage companies around the world. Today, we have with us 3 companies that represent food allergy prevention, treatment, and the potential of wearable AI technology to track anaphylaxis and health data. We need to approach food allergy from a multifaceted approach, and that is what this panel will highlight. I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Corey Drybush from the Wall Street Journal. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to Alana and the Food Allergy Fund for hosting this wonderful event. I'm thrilled to share the stage with 3 executives who are working to prevent, diagnose, and treat food allergies. To kick off the conversation, I'm going to turn to Michael Nelson, CEO of Interimune Therapeutics. Michael, when investors are thinking about what companies to fund, they often talk about the total addressable market. How many people are going to use the product or are going to need it in the future? I'm curious, not everyone in this audience may be aware of the large percentage of the US population who is impacted by food allergies. Can you talk a bit about that population as well as what you see as your company's total addressable market?
Yeah, I appreciate the question and really appreciate Food Allergy Fund for having us here and putting together this group is fantastic and a real testament to what Food Allergy Fund is doing, but also the importance of food allergies. The number of food allergies, I mean, you heard the numbers earlier, it was like 1 in 10 adults, 1 in 13 children, and that's 33 million people in the United States with food allergies. But it's not just the people with the food allergies, it's their entire families that are affected by food allergies. So when you're talking about the market, there was a study that just came out from Chris Warren. The cost of food allergies, including indirect costs, is $370 billion a year. So it's a huge number. The impact is tremendous. Of those 33 million, they're not all necessarily gonna seek treatment. We always assumed it was something along the lines of about 10% as the addressable market for those people, so about 3.3 million or so. But that doesn't mean more shouldn't get treated. It comes down to cost and other issues. But also, prevention. We've heard a lot about gut microbiome and prevention, and we know that you can prevent food allergies, maybe as many, over 80% of food allergies by providing early introduction of foods. And in terms of number of infants, I mean, there's 3.6 million babies born every year. 40% of those children are at high risk of food allergies. They have atopic dermatitis. They have a family member with a history of atopy, so a family member with respiratory allergies, food allergies, asthma. So those are the people that market that's there. So we estimate the early introduction, early exposure market to be about $13 billion total. But really, just spending a couple $100 million a year on early introduction, you could get a huge cost savings. You could save billions of dollars every year for the life of those infants by doing that early food exposure. So the market is tremendous. The issue is, I mean, early introduction sounds easy, but actually giving a kid a food every day, and you can't just do it once, because you do it once, you're actually sensitizing them. You have to do it multiple times. So our company, Interimune Therapeutics, is developing products that are incorporated right into everyday routines. It really people's habits. And so we develop products that embed food, allow food exposure. So we have toothpaste for adults for a therapeutic, and you'll hear about therapeutics in a moment. And then for younger kids, rub it on their gums. They get exposure to first peanut and then multiple foods over time. And just built right into the things parents are already told, rub your kids' gums and teeth to clean the teeth.
That's great. Tal Golan, you're CEO of Anjo. If you could tell us a little bit about your company and what do you see as your addressable market?
Thank you. Joining Michael's remarks about Food Allergy Fund, thank you. I'm Tal, co-founder and CEO of Anjo. At Anjo, we're developing remote monitoring and early detection, even prediction of anaphylaxis, using advanced wearable devices. Our story started with using wearable devices in our proprietary software and algorithms. Our story started with my co-founder's daughter, who nearly died from an anaphylactic reaction at daycare, even though everyone was very much aware of her allergy. What happened because of the delayed intervention is she spent 4 hours in the ICU, where they literally fought for her life. She was lucky and recovered. We have friends and colleagues that were not so lucky. For those who are not familiar or aware, one of the most crucial factors to determine the outcome of an anaphylactic reaction, is the timing of intervention. And the problem is most people have a difficult time differentiating between a mild reaction and a life-threatening one until major symptoms appear. But by then, the wolf is in the room. And so we leveraged our sensor development and commercialization experience and set out to build a platform for detection, continuous monitoring, detection of anaphylaxis. End of 24, reached clinical proof of concept in Israel after a feasibility study. And today, we're proud to collaborate with leading research institutions led by renowned immunologists for the discovery of novel biomarkers for anaphylaxis and applying machine learning on multiple markers being collected in real time. Our mission is to take allergy care from being reactive to proactive and to provide precision, personalized, data-driven, personalized care and support and safety. Addressable market is similar to Michael what said. We think the potential in what we define as we are able to map this autonomic dysfunction can apply to other conditions. And we say, why is it only diabetes that have connectivity and alerts and technology? And so we bring the technology. We are on a mission to bring technology, excuse me, to the underserved allergic community, and this will expand beyond that.
Great, thank you. Dr. Brian Wong, you're CEO of Wrapped Therapeutics. It's a publicly traded company. Investing in biotech companies tends to be a pretty niche market. Wrapped recently did a stock offering, sold additional shares, raised millions of dollars. I'm curious what type of investors are buying your company and how has that changed over time since you went public? Has a more generalist investor started to take notice and why do you think that is?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Alana and the Food Allergy Fund for this amazing forum, and I'm deeply inspired by working with all of you to bring new therapies or cures to patients. So just a little bit about Wrapped, and then I can talk about our investors. So as many of you know, there was a recent breakthrough last year with the NIAID-sponsored study called Outmatch, which led to the approval of the first-generation anti-IgE called omalizumab or Xolair, which was approved for now all IgE-driven food allergies for patients 1 year and above. And in a very short time, this is rapidly becoming the standard of care with over 85,000 patients now, food allergy patients on omalizumab. It's really transformed patients' lives because it addresses multiple allergens. It's dosed subcutaneously, so you don't need to take it daily. But there's certain limitations of this drug. Because of its relatively poor half-life and potency, it can address all patients, so roughly 25 to 30% of patients can't take omalizumab. And the second, it does require very frequent subcutaneous dosing, 26 times per year, often multiple shots. So where Wrapped comes in is that we're developing the next generation anti-IgE antibody. We think we can address all food allergy patients irrespective of their IgE levels. In addition to that, we can dose maybe 4 times a year with just 1 or 2 subcutaneous injections. So I'm myself a food allergy patient, and just imagine being able to send your child to college, knowing that they're going to be protected for a 3 or 4 month period, or the child who needs to be protected from an anaphylactic reaction at school. While we await these amazing cures, we think it's really critical to develop new therapies to address multiple allergens, reduce healthcare costs, and potentially even allow reintroduction of food back into the diet. This has really stirred the imagination of the investors as well. It started relatively small. Now that the omalizumab sales have increased, I think they're on the run rate of close to 2 or 3 billion in just the first 18 months. It really shows them that there's a market. And so we're seeing, first the specialized healthcare investors start. Now we're seeing, the Vanguards and Fidelities start to invest in this area. I think that's what will lift all boats now. So whether it's wearables, the prevention, different modes of therapeutics, we're working on biologics. This will really, I think, increase the level of investment in the area. It's very exciting.
That's great. So Tal, back to you. Much of modern medicine is considered reactive, and especially in the food allergy space. I'm wondering how your company is trying to change that.
Yes.
We spoke a little bit about it before, but.
So at the moment, we wait for the allergic reaction to show itself and determine the symptoms. In fact, at the home and through diagnostics and therapies, we provoke the reaction and wait. And what happens back at the home is that parents are left with life and death decisions based on subjective observations. And we want to remove the ambiguity. We want to bring objective data, and we want to bring early detection. I think many, if not all, critical medical conditions can be mitigated or solved with early detection. And anaphylaxis is a severe enough condition to deserve the same. So we think and we have very strong data with preliminary studies that with the use of machine learning, multiple markers being observed continuously and in real time through anaphylactic reactions, we can bring not only early detection, but a holistic support to whether it would be to the clinician or the consumer itself, through therapies, through clinical trials, post-clinical trials, et cetera.
Great. So Michael, back to you. Desensitization is traditionally thought of in the doctor's office. If you can speak a little bit to how you're trying to change that and bring some more of that into the homes, and what are the benefits of that, and also what are the risks?
So, what we're developing is a toothpaste with multiple foods in it. We think we could also develop a toothpaste for alpha-gal, which is allergy to meat, red meat, that's usually set off by a tick bite. Right now, traditionally, the way most food allergies are treated in the doctor's office and allergist's office is what's known as oral immunotherapy, where they give increasing doses of the food you're allergic to the patient to eat it, and eventually tolerize them to that food, desensitize them to the food, so that they could go out and, in most cases, it's not a cure, but they could go to a restaurant if they accidentally eat something. They won't have a reaction. For our product, we've done our phase 1 study in adults. We actually saw indications of efficacy in adults, but we had safety. We had no severe or moderate systemic adverse events with our study. We were able to updose in the doctor's office, but then the patient goes home and brushes their teeth, and they're supervised by the physician. And then when they went back, they updosed in the doctor's office, and then they went home. And so all of that was done, and mostly was done at home. Right? And you're not getting the same limitation. So, with oral immunotherapy, you can't exercise for hours. You're not supposed to take hot showers, and you're not seeing that with sublingual immunotherapy. We're a form of sublingual immunotherapy. We contact more active parts of the mouth that have more of the Langerhans cells. So the risk, of course, is you need that doctor supervision. You would want a device like Anjo's. You certainly want emergency epinephrine because it's not, in most cases, it's not an outright cure, but you need that regular food exposure to actually modify the disease. So even biologics like Brian's, you have to keep taking it. A lot of the biologics under development, they're like knocking down the immune system, but once you stop taking it, you're right back where you started. And so allergy immunotherapy actually modifies the disease and helps you, the body learn what to react to and not react to.
Yeah, that tees up for a great follow-up that each of your companies do different things, but there seems to be a world in which you can all work together, particularly if you're wearing the wearable as you're doing some microdosing, you can maybe potentially tell if you're about to go into anaphylactic. But Michael, I'd love to talk with you about how you're seeing more different technologies working together in different, Oh, sorry, Brian,
Yeah.
sorry.
No worries. Actually, I'm talking to both of these gentlemen here. I think this is an area, it's not a zero-sum game. There's really ways to work together and complement each other for the benefit of our patients. And so, for example, one of the biggest challenges in clinical trials right now is the oral food challenge. This requires somewhat subjective monitoring of patients of whether they're having a reaction or not. If we could bring data, machine learning, wearables to that kind of, to a trial situation, that could really, protect patients during the actual study and make it a lot more efficient and faster. With respect to oral immunotherapy, combinations are probably what's going to allow patients sustainable benefit. So combining a biologic with an oral immunotherapy, particularly one that's very convenient, could be the next standard of care.
Great. I guess for each of you, we can start with Tal. What do you see as the biggest barrier right now to progress in your space?
Data. As mentioned before, we are, for good or bad, are generating new data that has not been collected yet. We are the first company to monitor multiple biomarkers in real time throughout the whole life cycle of an anaphylactic reaction. And it's in order to get quality data, we need meaningful collaborations, clinical studies, and pilots, and that requires funding. Funding, obviously, whether it would be grants, philanthropy, or investments. But yeah, our biggest push right now is for data, because machine learning and AI is not of much use unless it has data.
That's great. Brian, what would you say?
So obviously, food allergy is a growing epidemic in the United States, and it's potentially lethal. So there's a sense of urgency here to bring cures forward, but as we await cures, to bring new therapies that can protect patients and children from anaphylactic reactions, reduce healthcare utilization, reduce ER visits, but also perhaps, and you looking forward, to allow patients to actually introduce serving-size foods back into their diet. And so for us, we really need support. We'd like to partner with the agencies to accelerate the development of our drug called ozurepabart. Very similar to how accelerated development was done in oncology, where there's different pathways that have been used in development initiatives to speed along these really urgently needed new medicines. So that's what I'm hoping to do with what we need.
Yeah.
For allergy immunotherapy, traditionally, as you mentioned, or we mentioned, is done in the doctor's office, oral immunotherapy. Patients don't want to be eating what they're allergic to. One is they have taste aversion, but two, it causes lots of reactions, right? In one study, there was 14% of the patients needed emergency epinephrine. So patients don't want to do that. And for me, with a mechanism that we believe is much safer, and our clinical study, our mega study showed that, the issue is still, the investors are hung up on allergy immunotherapy, and is there really a market for it? I think that's starting to change, but investment has been very difficult. So funding is really key. Knowing what the goalposts are, for, like you talked about the oral food challenge, like knowing what the specific target is that we need to do, and timelines, right? Like everything just takes too long.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe we have time for probably one final question for the panel, but we're here in the room with some very big science and health decision makers and government. I guess this is your chance to speak directly to them. What can the government do to help your innovations and make them get to market faster or help you?
I'll let Brian lead.
As I mentioned, I think we all recognize that this is a growing health epidemic in the United States. And so bringing new therapies, new diagnostic measures, preventative measures to patients as quickly as possible is critical. From my standpoint, we are in a phase 2 trial with ozureprobart, which is our long-acting IgE. We would love to partner with the FDA to find ways to accelerate the approval process of this drug, and also perhaps identify novel trial designs and novel endpoints that could really shorten the timeline from this stage of development to drug launch. As I mentioned, there are several initiatives that the FDA has undertaken to provide these accelerated pathways. So we'd love to be able to participate in some of those programs with the FDA, and to really bring this therapy and multiple therapies to patients in need.
Yeah. For the therapeutic that we're developing, well, a priority voucher would be really nice, but funding. Right? We need funding, and working with the government and NIAID would be really helpful. On the prevention side, just certainty, right? Like some of the stuff that we're doing, well, for the older kids, we're talking about a toothpaste with peanut protein in it. We can't say anything, right? It's a toothpaste with peanut protein in it. That's all it is, right? Even though those kids don't have food allergies. So having some certainty around what we're doing, and we're using all natural products, but to get an alpha-gal product developed, our initial estimate is $1 billion to get that through to the market. So.
Wow. And how long a time period?
And 5 to 7 years, and we've already been at it for 10 years. So.
Yeah. Top.
I would say recognizing the food allergy community. I think this is a tremendous step towards that area and goal. And the second thing, we see that the pediatric population, anything related to product regulatory, is extremely complex and difficult. And we're seeing some programs backed by the FDA to help ease the effort, but I think there needs to be more there. I think we find a pediatric population at risk, especially those that can't voice their feelings or what they're going through. And the path to do studies with pediatric is not easy, and also the product development. So I would say accessibility, accessible funding, and recognizing food allergy for how critical of an issue it is. And I would add anaphylaxis as a whole, because we're discussing food allergies, but anaphylaxis touches other conditions, and other anaphylaxis can be generated not only from food, but other issues. So that would be
my wish list. We do actually have a couple minutes, so I'll steal a question from this morning's excellent panel. What gives you optimism? What is making you excited? Just to close off on a positive note, if you want to start and go back.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. I think, and I think the administration recognizes it, that the potential of wearables, advanced wearables, it starts with a wearable, but there's already more advanced technological means to monitor us, embedded in the clothes, cameras, et cetera, we're just scratching the surface. And we can see large wearable manufacturers now leaning into health because they understand the potential. There's more work to be done on sensor development, but I think there's so much to understand about what goes in the human body throughout critical conditions and maybe before critical conditions. I don't know about microbiome, but I think we're just scratching the surface. I think the administration recognizes it, and we have to have more push towards development, the clinically grade medical or wearable devices to be accessible for the consumer.
The fact that we're sitting here as a community with policymakers, regulators, companies, researchers, I think gives me a lot of hope that we'll find solutions. It's not going to be one size fits all. There's going to be, I think, multiple prongs to treat patients at various stages of life. So it's just really incredible that there's a community here working towards a common goal.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen a lot of progress. I think everyone in this room knows how important food allergies are. It's starting to filter out. Certainly, families affected by it are aware of it, but I think a lot of the investors are starting to get a hang of it, that this is something that they should be investing in, that there's a big issue here. But really, the fact that we're actually starting to see some of these numbers and people being told, or pediatricians telling patients, like, feed your kids the foods, and you're starting to see the growth at least leveling off. And that gives me a lot of optimism that there really is something to that early exposure that makes a difference.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you again, Ilana.
Secretary Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us today and for your leadership on chronic disease. We're both food allergy parents. My daughter's here today. And although our children are a generation apart, we've seen little progress as food allergies have risen to a public health crisis. I'm grateful to highlight this critical issue and to discuss how we can change the course of this disease. Food allergies have received the funding of a rare disease despite reaching epidemic levels over the last 20 years. To put it in context, in 2024, food allergy research received $2.69 per capita in NIH funding, while Crohn's and IBD received $38 and $59 respectively. And yet food allergy impacts nearly 10 times as many patients. We're working to close the research, investment, and awareness gap. Why has food allergy remained a low public health priority, even as it now impacts nearly 10% of the population?
I mean, that is, it's an interesting question. I think the answer to that question is that the public health agencies have been focused on infectious disease rather than chronic disease. And a lot of the chronic disease, particularly those that have gone epidemic since 1990, when we saw this huge explosion in chronic disease, have been at least comparatively underfunded or disproportionately underfunded by the public health community. I mean, to me, the interesting question is, why aren't we trying to figure out what's causing it? Because, when I was a kid, I never met anybody with a peanut allergy. I had 11 siblings and around 70 first cousins, and I didn't know anybody in my school. I went to a bunch of different schools, to camps. I just didn't know. I never heard anybody with a peanut allergy. And Heather Fraser, in her book on the peanut allergy, says that the epidemic began in 1990. And prior to that, if you look through the scientific literature, it's really difficult to find anybody even mentioning or studying it. People just weren't studying it because it was not an issue. And so the year 1990 is interesting also to me because when Congress asked EPA to tell Congress what year did the autism epidemic begin, the EPA scientists came back and said it's a red line 1989. And prior to 1989, it was, in the 1970s, we did the biggest studies on autism, actually the biggest epidemiological study in history. And it found an incident rate of 0.7 per 10,000, so less than 1 in 10,000. And then by, the mid-90s, 1990s, it was going up to, 1 in 600, et cetera. And then, now it's 1 in every 31 kids. So the question is, why aren't we asking, and why aren't the public health agencies asking this question, what's causing it? This is an epidemic. And epidemic genes don't cause epidemics. They may provide a vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. And so why aren't we trying to identify the toxins that are making our kids sick? And, we saw these brilliant scientists up here, and I've been watching this since I became involved. I became involved, as you pointed out, because I had a son who was severely anaphylactic to not only peanuts, but all tree nuts and a lot of other stuff. He made, I think, 22 emergency room visits by the time he was 2 years old. And so this really focused my attention. He came close to dying so many times. And as you know, the whole world becomes hazardous. You send your child to a birthday party, and maybe the cake had, peanut oil, or somebody cooked in the same pan something with peanuts in it 2 days before. And so everything is a trap, and everything is a potential killer of your child. I really focused my mind on it, but and I was focused on, okay, what are we going to do to treat it and to prevent him from getting sick? And I also, my mind immediately went to the place of, why is this happening? 5 of my 7 kids have allergies. What happened? Something happened. And it appears to have happened somewhat at time around 1989, 1990. So you have to look at an environmental toxin that became ubiquitous during that year across all the different demographics, from Cubans in Key Biscayne, Miami, to Inuit in Alaska. Everybody started getting these allergies at that time. And why have there been no studies on that? Why are not people looking at that? Why isn't the entire scientific community focused on saying it's a very easy studies to do? You make a list of all the potential culprits that fit those criteria, and then you begin eliminating them. But those studies have never been done. We are going to do them now, and we will identify what is causing these allergies. The allergies, as I said, they've exploded. CDC, they were so rare that CDC did not even start counting them until 1997. It's just an obvious question. And we have an institute. I wish I was supposed to watch Jay speak. This program was running a little late, and I have a really tight schedule today. But in his agency, there's a sub-agency that was run by Anthony Fauci called the National Institute for Allergic and Infectious Diseases. It's supposed to study allergic diseases. And my question is, why didn't they immediately look on this and say, why are there suddenly all these kids with these allergies?
Food allergy has been proliferating, and it's very much a public health crisis that has flown under the radar. So I'm so excited that together we can really shine a spotlight on what needs to be done to change the course of this disease. You've said that thanks to President Trump's commitment to make America healthy again, your leadership at HHS has delivered more public health wins than any previous administration. Can you walk through some of these successes, especially as they relate to food?
Specifically with food. I guess one of the most important things is the GRAS standards. GRAS standards, the acronym GRAS means generally recognized as safe. And when the FDA began regulating food in the 1940s, they were regulating contaminants in food, since Upton Sinclair did his book, The Jungle, in the 1920s, and FDA was started as a result of that. They began regulating ingredients of food in the 1940s, but they said, well, we don't want to regulate ingredients that have been around forever, like wheat and flour and yeast and sugars. So we don't want people have to do new sets of studies on those kind of foods because they're proven. They're generally recognized as safe. So they develop that category. And if it is an ingredient that's been around for a long time, we're not going to force you to do the studies. That category, as the agency became captured by the food industry, that category was hijacked by the food industry so that and every new ingredient that was developed by any food company was automatically generally recognized as safe. And the burden of proving, the burden fell on the consumer and the government to prove harm if you didn't want the ingredient in the food. And the government doesn't have the money to do those tests. And so it just opened this loophole that now we have 10,000 ingredients in our food that are illegal in Europe. And Europeans have 400 ingredients. We have over 10,000. And we need to now, so what we're doing is closing that loophole, which we have to do with regulations. So that takes about 6 months, but we've already started that process. And then we're going to go back and do kind of triage where we have the power to force the companies that are making existing ingredients to go back and prove that they're safe. And we're going to we have a high priority list of priority ingredients that are the most common ingredients we're going to make them test first, but we're going to go now back through the entire list and make them to start testing it and telling us whether they're really safe or not. We're doing the SNAP waivers. 12 states have already gotten SNAP waivers, which we're encouraging. There's 6 states in line for them right now. These are food stamp waivers. About 10% of our food stamp expenditures go for soda drinks, and about 8% go for candies and sweets. And so we're giving the poorest Americans diabetes from when they're little. And we are paying for the diabetes through Medicaid, so it makes no sense. And so the SNAP waivers allow the states to step in and say, in this state, we're not going to pay for soda drinks, we're not going to pay for food. Some of them are doing ultra-processed food and other things that are SNAP. So we're getting rid of the food dyes, all of the petroleum-based food dyes. We're doing that very quickly. We have this Operation Stork Speed to clean up baby formula. We're ending the war on saturated fats in this country, so we're going to publish dietary guidelines that are going to stress the importance of protein and saturated fats. And those will come out, I think, next month. And I think that will really revolutionize the food system in the country and the food culture in this country, because it will be implemented almost immediately in the military and in federal institutions, and then next year, we're going to be very aggressive about getting good food into the schools, the elementary schools, the public schools of this country. Those are some of the things that we're doing. We have a list of 100, but time is limited.
Well, you're moving at breakneck speed, so we're all appreciative of it. But you mentioned the military. 78% of our children are ineligible to serve because of chronic disease, and food allergy itself is an automatic disqualification from service. So food allergy touches on so many aspects of our society. When you spoke at the National Governors Association over the summer, you challenged Governor Polis on the root causes of peanut allergy specifically. Can you tell us a little bit about what you said in that exchange?
Well, Governor Polis had advanced hypothesis about one of the causes of food allergies, a very popular hypothesis. In fact, it's one that Marty Markary talks about a lot, which is that maybe the peanut allergies are associated with the lack of peanut exposures to children. I guess in the 80s and 90s, that parents were told not to expose their children to peanuts, and that it was the lack of exposure, that early exposure, that maybe is triggering peanut allergies. And people talk about Israel, where apparently there are very few peanut allergies and where there's early exposure to peanuts. To me, that is not a convincing hypothesis because, number one, in my own personal experience was my house was so filled with peanut butter. And I was eating peanut butter 2 meals a day. And my wife, when she was pregnant, was eating peanut butter. And the kids were given peanut butter from as soon as they could chew food. And yet we still had peanut allergies in our house. And that's kind of anecdotal. But more importantly, peanuts really were not eaten by anybody until George Washington Carver came along. And really, they didn't, there was no mass consumption of peanuts until after peanut butter was invented. That was in the 1920s, but really during World War I and World War II, it became a source of protein when there was, when there were restrictions on other sources of protein that people could get a hold of. And so suddenly you had a whole population that was eating peanuts, and yet there were no peanut allergies. It doesn't make any sense to me that a peanut allergy is just is from a deprivation of peanuts. There's many countries in the world that only started eating peanuts recently, and you didn't see huge waves of peanut allergy. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, one of the things that I said to Governor Polis is that we need to look at aluminum adjuvants in vaccines, which fit the timeline perfectly. The increase of aluminum is in lockstep, which began in 1989, which is in lockstep with the expansion of peanut allergies. We don't have the science to say this is an effect or not. Or maybe other things like, for example, pesticides that fit the same timeline. But those are the kind of things that we have to look at. The aluminum adjuvants are designed to increase the immune response and to hyperactivate your immune system. And they do that along the they cause Th2 inflammation, which creates IG2, which the gentleman up here were talking about mediated pathway. So there are many studies that show when you give animals aluminum adjuvants, they do develop allergies to proteins that are in the vaccine when they're given that, or that they're exposed to in the ambient environment. And so that's something that we need to look at. And there's a couple of scientists, a guy called Anthony Mawson from the University of Mississippi and another scientist called Cowlings from Europe that have looked at allergies in vaccinated children versus unvaccinated children. And I think Mawson's study found that vaccinated children had 30 times the rate of allergic rhinitis as unvaccinated children. And the hypothesis is, and when you get that aluminum vaccine, if there's a Timothy weed outbreak at that time, and maybe that might give you a lifetime allergy to Timothy weed if you're sensitized by the aluminum at that time. But again, we don't know. I mean, the problem is there haven't been any human cohort studies. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of animal studies. Why didn't CDC or NIAID do those human studies? Because it's pretty easy to figure this out, and we will figure it out.
In general, it seems that food allergy is the perfect storm, right? It's multiple factors that have come to a peak and a crescendo in this generation. To your point, in terms of early introduction and exposure, the only thing I craved my entire pregnancy was peanuts. I ate cans and cans of peanuts, probably too many peanuts, more than any human being should eat. But nevertheless, we talk to hundreds and thousands of families every year in the work that we do, and all of them have done early introduction, and it works for some, it doesn't work for others. And for the kids who are already living with food allergies and for the adults who are developing allergies later in life as well, half are now starting in adulthood, we need to look at all these factors that are contributing to the rise in the disease.
Yeah, there may be many factors. There may be only one. We don't know. Why don't we know? Because there's been basically malpractice in the government-funded scientific community. Why wasn't this a question that was being asked, that was being demanded? As soon as this allergy started to appear, why weren't we putting out, requests for proposals saying, tell us why this is starting? And instead it became a verboten subject. You weren't allowed to study it. And science warned each other against studying it. And so, we're going to study it now. We're going to break that omerta. We're going to end the taboo, and we're going to find out what's causing it.
It's a very exciting moment. Food allergy is in much needed research, certainly. What do you see as the single most decisive step that this administration can take to end the childhood chronic disease epidemic?
I would say if I had to guess about, the most important exposures, I would point my finger at ultra-processed food. And again, it's criminal that we do not have a clear answer to that right now. But there is a lot of accumulating scientific data and scientific studies that and also just common sense that point to ultra-processed foods. There's all kinds of, our kids are swimming around in a toxic soup, microplastics, EMF radiation, and then, pesticides, and, all of these toxic exposures that are affecting them from birth. And so addressing, though, in a specific sense, President Trump has asked us to address those, to identify what the culprits are, and then to eliminate them. And then I think, in a broader sense, we need to realign, we need to make sure that we're getting gold standard science, and that the science is not responsive to prejudice or to bias or to official orthodoxies, that people are allowed to ask questions, and they're allowed to question everything, and that there's nothing that is off bounds. I think Jay Bhattacharya is working really successfully to redirect, to recalibrate the compass at NIH where people feel safe researching formerly taboo subjects. And that's what he said to me from day one, is we need to break the taboos so people can ask questions. And then, I think the last category is what we're doing at CMS, which is to realign the perverse incentives that incentivize everybody, the hospitals, the doctors, the scientists, the government, to keep people sick. We literally are incentivized to keep people sick. You can make more money by keeping the hospitals make more money, the doctors make more money, the insurance companies make more money. Everybody's making more money for keeping us sick. No matter how good-hearted you are as an individual, those incentives will affect societal behavior. And what we're trying to do is to realign those incentives so that you can do well by doing good, that people are going to be rewarded for making their patients better rather than for giving them a bunch of tests and then, making their money on the friction or giving them interventions that they don't need. That we're all, incentivized to make Americans healthier.
Absolutely. I mean, the economic impact of food allergy alone, every 3 minutes someone goes to the emergency room. 30% of food allergy moms are dropping out of the workforce, $30 billion on direct medical costs, and the list goes on and on. So I think if we start with food allergy, and really we talked earlier today in the program about gut microbiome health and thinking of food allergy as the canary in the coal mine for chronic disease that often presents in the first 2 years of life, earlier than many other childhood conditions such as autism, juvenile diabetes, asthma, et cetera. So if we can figure out what's going on with food allergy, crack that nut, no pun intended, I think it will have lifelong gut health implications.
Yeah, and I think when we figure out the answer for food allergies, that there's a whole list of atopic diseases that exploded simultaneously in lockstep with food allergies. Eczema, or allergic dermatitis is called, it used to be called, which again, I didn't know anybody with eczema when I was a kid, and now, you have a whole generation that has eczema. Anaphylaxis, atopic diseases. And I'll say one thing about the residual food proteins in vaccine, because the science suggests that aluminum alone will not cause allergies, but there are but when it's combined with a protein, if it's a latex protein or a dairy protein or a peanut protein, that's when you get this heightened immune response. But in the 1990s, there were a lot of anaphylaxis cases suddenly exploding in Japan. And they traced it to gelatin in the live virus vaccines and the MMR vaccines and some of the other vaccines they had over there. And by 2000, they had removed it all, and the anaphylaxis dropped dramatically. And so, I think we do have human models where you can look at you can look at sort of broad allergic reactions that take place across an entire society that are linked to the vaccine schedule. And there's no question about the science. There's all kinds of studies done on the Japanese example. And so it's just another piece of evidence in the puzzle that, we are now going to put together at NIH and at the other agencies and figure out exactly what is causing this.
Well, we're so grateful for your leadership and for the beginning of putting the puzzle pieces together. So thank you so much, Secretary.
Thank you.
It is now my privilege to introduce NIH Director Dr. J. Bhattacharya and NIAID Acting Director Dr. Jeffrey Taubenberger. Dr. Bhattacharya was the 18th Director of the NIH earlier this year. He previously held a tenure professorship in the medical school at Stanford University. His research focused on population aging and chronic disease, particularly on the health and well-being of vulnerable populations. He has published over 170 research papers in peer-reviewed journals in medicine, epidemiology, health policy, economics, statistics, science policy, and public health, as well as a leading textbook on health economics. Dr. Taubenberger oversees a $6.6 billion budget that supports research to advance the understanding, diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of infectious, immunologic, and allergic diseases. He's a senior investigator in the intramural research program and serves as chief of the viral pathogenesis and evolution section and deputy chief of the Laboratory of Infectious Diseases. Prior to coming to NIAID in 2006, he served as chief of molecular pathology at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. Thank you so much for joining us. As you heard from Secretary Kennedy, we're very excited to hear about the research that will be coming at the NIH. Thank you.
Thanks, Lana. Jeffrey, thanks for coming out with me.
Thank you, Jay.
Usually just me. Some of the change that you've overseen at National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. That's what Tony Fauci used to run, right?
Correct.
You're sitting in Tony Fauci's old chair.
Yes.
How have you changed things? How will we change things together?
So, since you've asked me to step up as acting director 6 months ago, as we've discussed, I think that the Institute needs to refocus a bit. For a long time, we've sort of had three pillars in our Institute. Sort of our research portfolio was sort of divided into thirds: HIV/AIDS, biodefense, and other. That's everything else. All of immunology, allergy, and other infectious diseases.
All the allergies.
Right. So, as I see it, and if you just sort of look back to what the name is that we really should only have two pillars: infectious diseases and immunology. And the allergy is, sort of an abnormal immune response. There are two sides to one coin, and they're immutably separable. That you can't look at infectious diseases without immune and inflammatory responses and the other way around. And a great place for that to be seen is how that relates to the development of the normal immune system with the microbiome, and we can talk about that later. But in terms of, I think the term biodefense made sense maybe in a post 9/11 world, with anthrax attacks and the kind of that mindset the United States had. But I think currently, it makes much more sense to not use that term. And I think we have common infections, we have rare epidemic infections like Ebola or Crimean Hampshire Congo fever, other Nipah virus, other nasty things, and the potential of pandemics to form. But it's a spectrum, but they're all infectious diseases. And we can make a lot of progress by studying and providing better treatments and preventions for common diseases, while at the same time we still prepare for future outbreaks that we can't predict.
You showed me a nice graphic where you have, on the one hand, you have the pathogens that still cause harm in humans. We ought to study those. On the other side, response a disease, it's that the human being reacts to the pathogen, or a human being reacts to exposures to,
that the Institute has been very infectious. Human we need to focus on patient outcomes. And so I think patients, not the bugs. Key, but then also, and as we've talked about with microbiome, not all bugs are pathogenic, right? And so we need to understand the good bugs. Relationship between the development of a normal and an abnormal immune response and inflammatory responses that underlie probably all chronic diseases and are critically important for the development of these allergic diseases.
Go back to food allergies, and I promise we're going to talk about food allergies. I just want to get one thing out of the way, just so everyone can hear loud and clear. For a long time, the idea of how to deal with emerging infectious diseases involved finding bugs in the wild that weren't infecting humans, manipulating them, dangerous gain of function, and then like trying to get vaccines and other countermeasures even before they infected humans. It sounds crazy now, but it's in retrospect. The President Trump issued an executive order saying no more dangerous gain of function. How have we forward?
Well, we are excited to work with you and the administration as the new policies are laid out, and we will absolutely follow the policies. And dangerous gain of function will not have any part in the portfolio of the research done at NIH or funded by the NIAID moving forward. As you said, it's important to know that we face novel infections usually from animals, that is zoonotic infections that have the ability to cause disease in humans, usually as small, one-off or small outbreaks, but sometimes a virus particularly, or it could be bacteria, can adapt from one host to another and can adapt to humans. We can't predict it. We can look at what's happened in the past. We can prepare for it in the way that you can design buildings to withstand
again, the host and the So having a healthy population, a metabolically healthy population, would be a great way to prepare for, uncertain new outbreaks.
Certainly, no, I would agree with that, and that's obviously critical. And having, a normal, having your immune system develop in a normal way, which again comes back to the food allergies and relates to how the immune system interacts with the microbiome is key. And so I think that this topic has been really important in our institute for a long time, but I think it needs to become an even bigger part of it and to live up to our name of the allergy part of our name.
Okay, so I want to first talk about some of the investments that the NIH has made in allergies, and in particular peanut allergies, because that's a topic, of course, that's of concern to so many people. I think I was looking at the numbers. It's like 1 in 10 adults have some food allergy, and 1 in 13 kids have some food allergy. And there's been a huge increase in these sort of atopic diseases in the last 20, 30, whatever time period you want. It's a real puzzle. I heard the secretary to ask about this, and he talked about it like a puzzle. Like what's the rise? Now NIAID has made some investments in this in the past. So like for instance, the idea that early exposure to peanuts can help prevent the development of peanut allergies later, that comes out of a trial that NIAID funded.
Correct. It's going back 20 years to 2005 when this was started and recognized as a really important clinical study. And I'm really happy to represent the institute that had that foresight and developed these clinical studies. And that LEAP study has led to a complete systems change in clinical care and practice, as we've been hearing all morning long. So very excited that AID was able to fund some of the key parts of that. So if you think about that and then the development of the omalizumab monoclonal antibody anti-IgE therapy, is two aspects of thinking about ways of treating and improving treatment for people who have such peanut allergies. What we need to do now and to go forward is to think about more research on prevention, and that is back to this key of how do we shape the developing immune system early in life so that it doesn't have this kind of allergic responses but has more of a tolerant response. So the immune system has many different functions, but in T cells, one of their major functions is to recognize sort of self from non-self, right? And that's important in terms of infections, but our bodies, in terms of our GI tracts, our skin, our respiratory tracts, we're exposed to foreign substances all the time, right? And if we responded to everything as if it were a serious infection, we would develop all these inflammatory and immune responses that would be non-physiologic and would be dangerous. And so the key is how can we look at what happens normally and what happens abnormally and what are the triggers during development and how that might relate to other physiologic, environmental, and microbiome changes.
I was sitting over there listening to the secretary talk about the lack of knowledge that we have about some of these topics. And I find myself agreeing with him about that pretty fundamentally. Like I think that it's important to know that early exposure might prevent the subsequent development. But yet, as the secretary pointed out, you still see many people developing allergies, food allergies in adulthood, right? You're seeing this sharp rise, and I don't know the answer to all that. And it sounds like that's.
I think that is the key aspect of what we need to do going forward. So another thing that the Institute is funding that I'm very excited about is a big data project. And this was talked about earlier in the day, but traditionally in science, you kind of do smaller science that's hypothesis-driven, where you actually test in experimental systems, the validity of your hypothesis or not. In this case, what I think is really important in this sort of big data idea, this kind of systems biology idea, where you can sample sort of everything, the host genome, the microbiome, looking at their immune responses, inflammatory responses, sample the skin, sample GI, sample serum, sample immune responses, sample cytokines, sample all sorts of things at the same time. You generate so much data that humans can't actually take it in and can't analyze it. But using machine learning and AI now, you can generate these huge big data sets and then mine them to help us understand the patterns of infants who develop various atopic responses versus those that are tolerant to those, and how are things changing, what are the biomarkers, and how can we use that to understand the basic pathophysiology of what's happening to think of better ways to achieve prevention and then better treatments that are more tailored to individuals, for those who do still have these things.
So you have a full cycle. You've collected a lot of data driven with an idea of what you want to look at potentially, even broader than that. You allow people to ask questions about it, openly questions, even questions that are taboo.
Right.
You develop hypotheses from that, and the most promising ones you test with randomized studies, and I mean that sounds like science to me.
Exactly, and it is the National Institutes of Health, and while basic science is absolutely the absolute rock solid foundation of that, the goal is to take those understandings of basic science and translate that into improved patient care. So the goal, from the very most basic level up through clinical research, is always to advance and improve human healthcare.
I mean, to me, one of the reasons why I've been so focused on the replication crisis is that it really throws a wrench in this process, our learning, right? So you'll have products of science that come out, and you don't know if they're true or false, right? And it's only when multiple other independent authors look at the same thing and they find the same answer, you start to get more science is a process like that. And in a way, it feels like it got broken during the pandemic, pretty fundamentally. Like it was difficult to ask questions, like academic freedom. I could experience it firsthand, and to me, like the exciting thing about being part of the NIH now is that we can be part of an infrastructure, an ecosystem that encourages people to ask questions, like that allows people to ask lots of questions. Okay, I promise you get back to the microbiome, and we have 2 minutes left, so let me get back to that. That's something I did not learn about in medical school. I'm ancient. It was like when the dinosaurs walked the earth, no one told me about microbiomes. And yet it's coming. It's the evidence that's emerging is that it's pretty fundamental to human health. Like the obesity crisis might be linked to problems with our microbiome. The food allergies we heard might have some. So tell us about the investments that NIH is making in microbiome research.
Yeah. So I can say that when you asked me to step up as acting director 6 months ago, the first meetings I had with the senior leadership of the Institute were to understand the research portfolio about microbiomes. And after those discussions, I made the sort of snide but true comment that we have 150 years of literature on immunology and infectious diseases, none of which have considered microbiome, and we should probably throw the whole literature. And that really is true. We are missing an enormous component of how is functions and how the immune system develops. And the amazing things that we're learning about food allergy and the as was said earlier, our microbiome is on all of our external surfaces, so that your respiratory tract, the skin, the genitourinary tract. So, I'm really interested in research on these other aspects that have been less funded, including, instead of just the colonic microbiome, what is happening in the much more metabolically active small intestine in terms of its microbiome, for example, and how the skin microbiome and immune responses to that affect the development of food allergies in the colon and vice versa, with this commonality of infants having both eczema and food allergies. And what is the crosstalk between the immune system, the inflammatory responses from that, and these different microbiomes? It's a whole new world, and this is absolutely a huge part of the future of the Institute if we're going to make any progress.
Yeah, I mean, it seems impossible to think about learning about eczema without thinking about the skin microbiome, for instance.
Right.
We're just missing a fundamental piece.
Right.
The secretary mentioned alum exposure as a hypothesis for. What do you think of that, and how can we study that?
Well, I mean, as the secretary said, I mean, this would require clinical trials, prospective clinical trials, well designed, and they would have to be long term. It would be expensive, but these are things that should be discussed. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
All right, Jeff. Well, it's telling us we're down to 0. I'm having too much fun, but
Okay.
we still need to end.
Okay.
Thank you for coming out. I mean, just to close real fast, the future of the NIH is going to look very different than the past. It'll look the same in one sense. Like the NIH has a century of real accomplishment in advancing biological knowledge. That will be the same. But the set of things we ask about, the way that we go about it, the openness, the academic freedom, is completely different. Hopefully you heard that in the spirit of our conversation. Thanks. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
So much for joining us. It's been an inspiring and impactful day. The work is just getting started. So thank you again. For those of you staying for lunch, please join us across the hall and please be in touch. We're in this together. Thank you.